Welcome to the Rising Up post show on foxla.com. On tonight's episode of the documentary Rising Up, it looked to the future where congressional police reform stands and the future of the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, after each episode, all night this week, we talked about it. Among our guests this week, a deputy who was on the scene during the protests, Rodney King's daughter, a professor of social justice, and just last night we had the sheriff of Riverside County. Well, tonight we're joined by a nonprofit, and they have got a really incredible series called Tears, where they're talking as well. So we welcome actor and activist Anne-Marie Johnson and journalist Richard Steller, founder of the Mankind Project. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, Christine.
Anne-Marie, I'll start with you. Your reaction to tonight's episode?
I think my reaction is consistent with all 5 episodes. It's been really captivating and a great way to not only memorialize what we've experienced just in the past 12 months, but historically in Los Angeles, but kind of to remind us how important it is to have respectful conversation from all points of view, which obviously Tears, our project, is all about, and you folks have done an incredible job doing that.
Richard, it's been a tough year plus. How was it to relive all of that?
Well, it was painful, but but your series was great in that it included everyone's voice. It seems that we're dictated. Everyone has an agenda, and even us as a nonprofit, we're dictated as to what direction people want to go in and what they want said. And it was good to see that that everyone had a voice in your series, and it's been a rough year.
Well, you know, we had 21 people interviewed in the documentary. I always say there are 28 more who still would like to weigh in, so I feel like we're just getting started. But I want to get to your history and your stories here. Anne-Marie, you've got a fascinating background. Let's just show a photo of, let's say, your dad, who was a sergeant in the LAPD. And, well, this is a show of you on the TV show, In the Heat of the Night. Great show there, obviously a law enforcement theme, and that is your father. I'd like to get your take on the Black Lives Matter movement.
Well, as you said, I'm in a very unique position. Obviously, I'm African American. I'm female. I'm second generation Angelino, and my father was a member of the Los Angeles Police Department during a very turbulent time. He was one of the first officers to integrate a squad car. What a lot of people don't realize is the LAPD was a segregated police force. And my father came on at a time where not only was he judged outside of the 4 walls of the LAPD, but also inside the 4 walls. So I do have a very unique perspective. I've seen the evolution of the LAPD. I've lived in Los Angeles my whole life, so I've seen the evolution. It's a tough position to be in. I support the philosophy of Black Lives Matter, but what Richard and I discovered during our project, which we started, back in August 2020, there are myriad opinions. And Black Lives Matter doesn't represent the entire opinion of the African American community in Los Angeles, nor does the LAPD represent the opinion of all the officers within the LAPD. So there's so many points of view, which both of our projects, yours and the Mankind Project, we tried to focus on as many points of views as possible.
We're going to get to your project in just a bit, but Richard, I wanted to ask you, you and I have done a story together where I watched you physically go out and give food to the homeless. So I know that you're into social services, and that was part of the call of the Black Lives Matter movement, more social services. Your thought on the movement?
I agree that Black Lives Matter. I think that given the murder of George Floyd and what has been going on, that there needs to be a Black Lives Matter. I'm also, I think that saying all lives matter is probably one of the most racist things you can say. As a Jew, we have a slogan, all Jews do, called Never Forget, which pertains to the Holocaust. Black Lives Matter pertains to what's going on with Black people in this country, and Black Lives Matter is extremely necessary as a social movement. And I wish that My feelings for Black Lives Matter, I don't think are really pertinent because I'm white. So I applaud what they do.
Was there something in tonight's final episode that really stood out to you?
What stood out to me were, it's when Al Sharpton said that only when regular people rise up will things change, because it seems that regular people, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, they got it. You know, they paid for violence in the color of authority. And these are regular people. These are people that I know, that you know. These are people that we help. I mean, as you said, we're in the street feeding the homeless. How many people pay for their color because of their color? So when Reverend Sharpton said that, I thought that was really significant, and I got a lot of meaning out of that.
Well, I know with your project, the Mankind Project, and your Tears series, you've interviewed and had a lot of people come on to talk about this whole issue. We're going to get to that in a second. But first, right now, we're coming up on 6:30 here. We want to welcome any viewers who are just joining us from TV, watching the series on TV. After looking back at the year that was 2020, we started with the death of Kobe Bryant. Remember that? Then the pandemic, to the death of George Floyd and the protests that followed. Tonight was about the future and where we all go from here, so let's take a look.
Of course, you see the black faces, but you see the Asian, the Latino faces, you know, the white faces. I loved it. It gave me hope.
I can only hope that our young generation continues to fight the way they're fighting, continue to march, to continue to demand for justice and respect.
If you want peace, be it. If you want to love, be it. You can be whatever you want. Or you could be a racist bigot, and you can be that too. So if whatever you want, be it. I want peace.
And we know that we can be a divided nation when it comes to looking at America's history and race and where we stand today. I bring back my guests, Anne-Marie Johnson and Richard Steller from the Mankind Project. Anne-Marie, start me out. How do you see us moving forward with this discussion?
Well, I'm not as optimistic, and I was very disappointed in President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's comment about America not being a racist country. I love America. I love being an American. I love being an African American. But America is a racist country. And if it weren't so, what better proof is the fact that 43 states are trying to restrict the accessibility of democracy, our right to vote, specifically to slow down the momentum of non-white voters. It is intentional. What else could explain the fact that the Senate was unable to move forward with a very important vote today? So America is a racist country. Is it all countries have a streak of racism in it? Are we moving forward? Without question. Do we have much more work to do? Without question. But if we're going to have this conversation, it's going to have to be an honest conversation.
Speaking of conversations, I'm wondering if we can run the clip from your series of conversations called Tears, and I'll wait for my team to tell me that we're ready to go on that. And then, Richard, my question will be for you to kind of talk to me about the kind of people you interviewed. Is it a well-rounded discussion? What was your goal with this? And then we'll see if we can run the clip. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, that's quite a question, because our goal is to include all voices, and we had we've included some very powerful people, from Chief Michael Moore to we had Keith David. We had we just had a lot of
former Chief of Police Charlie Beck and Civil Rights Attorney Connie Rice. I mean, we from A to Z.
Yeah,
we had a lot of voices, and one voice was particularly absent that we wished we would not have left because we did not do their bidding.
Do you want to say who that is?
Well, we wanted representation from everyone. And so we reached out and actually had the experience of interviewing both Dr. Abdullah and two other members of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. And when they found out that we were also interviewing LAPD officers, specifically Chief Michael Moore, they demanded that their content be removed. And so even though we were very disappointed by that, we honored their request. But now that we've seen that Dr. Abdullah felt comfortable being on your series, at least out of 4 out of the 5 episodes, we're going to revisit our interview with Dr. Abdullah.
Well, to give you a thought on that, I did ask her about that and her not being a part of your series. And she had said that they had a longstanding policy of BLM and not meeting with the LAPD, and questioned the format. But let's take a look quickly, if we can, at what you did do with Tears. We got just a short clip.
There's no legislation that can be passed. There's no fix that can be made. The fix has to be done from within our own hearts.
They don't see me. I don't know what they see, but it's not me.
And again, I'm looking at a host of Hollywood there, the supermodel Beverly Johnson, they're one of them. What was your goal there with getting people to continue the conversation, Richard?
The goal was diversity, and the goal was the truth, and the goal was transparency. That's always been our goal. That will remain our goal, and we've been pretty successful in getting people to just lay it out on how, the revelations of how stereotyping and racism affected these people were just shocking to me. And our goal is to provide a platform for people to speak, all people to speak, and for all of us to work together in a spirit of empathy and tolerance to end systemic racism, or at least shine a light on it so we're aware of it when it happens and we can speak out against it, as we are going to do in a future broadcast on a very heavy subject.
You know, we don't have the luxury of bringing somebody on right now to perhaps counter that, because some would say America has come far, we're living in today, that it's not a racist country. Anne-Marie, what would you want to talk about with someone who has that perspective?
Well, it's an interesting perspective, but it would be hard pressed for any person of color, specifically African American, to challenge my statement that this is still a racist country. I think what a lot of people believe, well, you had an African American president. Yes, we did. And what was that followed with? It was followed with one of the most dangerous human beings outside of World War II, Donald Trump. So it's an ebb and a flow. We are making incredible advances in this country, but I would be less than honest if I believed that this country was not racist.
Mm-hmm. Richard, with your series Tears, I know you had young voices weigh in. What do you make of the young generation that really, we saw them in the streets with the protests? What do you make of their call for change?
I think it's fantastic. If you look at the sea, when I was watching one of the episodes and it showed the helicopter view of Hollywood Boulevard and just the sea of humanity that was out there, and it was, I can relate to it because we were out on the streets when we were fighting for motion picture elderly. We were out on the streets fighting against anti-Semitism. Every culture shares the common thread of oppression, and the youth of today, I think they get it. And although things get kind of violent, I mean, if I was a kid during World War II in Germany, I probably would have knocked down a few Volkswagen dealerships myself. But it's just the passion is there. They've got it, and we want to channel it into something that actually has a result, a positive result. So I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I'm going to ask our team to show the pictures again in case viewers are just joining the chat that came over from the TV part of pictures, Anne-Marie, of your father being an LAPD officer. And when you heard the term defund the police, because for a lot of people, that was the first time they'd ever heard something like that. And I think over time with this past year plus, we have learned to realize that means different things to different people. So I'm just curious where you stand with the concept of defunding the police.
Well, I don't support defunding the police. I don't support abolishment of the police. I want to make that very clear. What I do support is allowing the police just to do the limited services that they want to provide. They don't want to be our wet nurses. They don't want to be our psychologists or our socialists or our babysitters or our teachers. They really want to protect and to serve. We've placed way too much on our police officers, and it's an unfair burden, and it's up to us to make sure that we support other services that are much better equipped to deal with systemic social ignorance with regard to mental health and other issues. The police cannot be our babysitters, and it's an unfair burden.
What about the Policing Act? It's held up in Congress right now because Republicans don't want qualified immunity for the officers to be held accountable, but maybe the departments. So what about that?
I believe the departments should be held. All departments should be held accountable. I'm uncomfortable with making the officer accountable because it's not just the officer; it's the officer's family, the children of the officer, the extended family of the officer. So I'm not comfortable with that, but I am certainly comfortable with holding all police departments responsible for their officers who cause harm or death to Americans.
Richard, as we had this part 5 that aired tonight, is there a further discussion that you want to see happening as we watch this documentary series and we go home and we think about this? What more do you want to have us discussing?
I want us to discuss how we can help how we can reach beyond our own challenges with racism and intolerance, and how we can help other people, other cultures in their battle. We did we had George Takei do an event for us about Chiune Sugihara, who was a Japanese diplomat during World War II, who saved thousands of Jews. He had never met a Jew in his life, but he saved thousands of Jews from execution. And I think the conversation, if it's going to go further, of course, we have to look after our Black brothers and sisters. We have to look after everyone who is oppressed. But let's reach beyond ourselves. Let's reach beyond our own culture and help other.
Mm-hmm. These conversations can be considered sometimes difficult. When you did your series and you had your panelists weighing in on things, what did you find, Richard, I'll start with you, that was uncomfortable for people?
Anytime when Beverly Johnson, when she described being pulled over in West Hollywood, which would I think would be a woke, area with a woke department, a law enforcement department, and the way she was handled and so disrespectful, it's difficult for me as just as an American to hear that we're doing that to people. And you'd think that, Beverly Johnson, she's in fashion magazines, and it just blew my mind that, and with every other story, there is people reveal in this series Tears, they reveal things that are not comfortable, yet they feel comfortable in saying it, which is what we have to do. We have to just support each other's voices.
Anne-Marie, why don't you give me a final thought as we thank you both, the Mankind Project, for stepping up to be our final guests as we've done this week-long series. Give me a final thought that you'd like to leave us with.
Well, first of all, kudos to you for an incredible 5-night series. I know how hard it was, and I certainly enjoyed it, and it was an eye-opener. And our next episode will stream June 3rd, and we deal with personal experiences of being profiled. We've got Titus Macon and Keith David and Laura King of the Rodney King Foundation, and Kevin Welbeck of the Create the Change Foundation, and Keith David. And they share some very painful experiences. But our whole goal was, we don't judge. We allow you to express yourself without judgment, without ridicule, without interrupting you, and with the utmost respect, because that is the only way we're going to be able to build sustainable bridges.
And we find your series where?
You can find us at defundthefear.com. Defundthefear.com.
All right, we'll look for it there. Anne Marie, thank you so much. Richard, thank you so much. We appreciate all your hard work. We want to let everyone know that we have been streaming this show on foxla.com right after each episode of the documentary Rising Up. If you'd like to go back and watch every episode, if you missed part one, I highly recommend it. You can catch it, and there are a lot of places to see it. Rising Up can be found on our website, foxla.com, on YouTube, on Tubi, Fox News Now, and Fox Soul. We tried to bring extra voices to the conversation on this part, the chat, with like radio host Tammy Mack and John Cobelt, or deputies and police officers like LAPD Commander Ruby Flores talking about the hiring of more women in law enforcement. And as you saw, activists like Anne Marie Johnson and Richard Saylor, we thank you so much. You can also find us all on foxla.com. Also on our website, an interactive timeline starting with the Rodney King beating in 1991. We go way back. You can click through events that took place since then, especially since the start of 2020. It ends with the latest decision by a federal judge to restrict the LAPD's use of foam projectiles against protesters. It's a great tool to see where we've been over the past year and where we are now. That's on foxla.com/risingup. Again, I know there are a lot of voices we could still continue to bring into the conversation. I think we're going to do that right here at Fox 11. For now, I'm Christine Devine. We thank you for joining us all week. Again, we'll continue talking. For now, have a good evening.